Welcome to Deeper in Spirit, the Ancient Teachings section on our website. Are you aware that you're inescapably connected to all things? We talk a lot about manifesting in the world, and it's this very connection that has an impact on and is impacted by our very desires and our wants, our health, spiritually, psychologically, physically, in all ways. That it's an interplay that's going on. We talked earlier in the About section on the website that all things are connected through this vibration, light, and sound energy. And in these ancient teachings, there's a sound that gets used in the texts in the Aramaic language. There's a sound of Shem, Shem. And it's that vibration, light, and sound energy. You see, the Aramaic language is a really important piece of this puzzle as we're talking about these ancient teachings. Because I can read these texts over and over in English, and I'm asking God for clarity and questioning what's going on here and making sure that I begin to understand and I truly get answers. But my starting point was from that English perspective. And so we have to go back and understand what was really being said. In the Aramaic language, it's a very, very rich syntax and text that tells us that we need to understand that there's a psychology going on here. There's a philosophy going on here. And there's all manner of things associated with the body, the mind, the heart, the soul, the spirit. All these pieces are assumed within this language as being well understood. So it's really easy to see how somebody seeking to take what was being spoken and write it down in a different language would have difficulty in selecting exactly the depth of meaning that was meant during the time that it was spoken and then to the time that it was translated and written down. And so clearly none of the authors in the scriptures of the Bible wrote things down in English. So they were translated from the Aramaic to other languages, and then from those languages to others, and then to the English language ultimately. And so this is where it comes from. So we can understand that Jesus may have been talking about some things that aren't obvious, once again, if we read that surface layer, that surface level of the Bible. Nothing wrong with the Bible. It doesn't, in English or in any other language, it doesn't say anything wrong, and it is a complete text and has everything in there that we need. So the question becomes, with respect to these teachings, is how much do you really want to know? And do you really want to get the value of what was being originally spoken as you're coming back and looking at these texts and reading through the Bible? Do you really want to understand what it was that Jesus was trying to tell us? I've already spoken about this vibration that flows through all things. Actually, I've spoken about it as vibration, light, and sound. And it flows through all things. And so I have access to it. It's part of me. But I need to learn how to use it. And I can make choices. I have free will with respect to it. And this is why Jesus was telling us, you can do these things that I'm doing. You can do these things and more. It's by accessing that vibration, light, and sound energy that lives inside of us and is connected. It is of the divine. It is of God. But it lives within inside of us, each and every one of us. I can make choices. I can decide to ignore it. I can decide to work against it. I can decide to work to flow with it. And I can decide to leave it up to chance. Say, yes, it exists, but I'm a free spirit, and I'm going to let it I'm going to let the dice roll. And so the results that we bring in our lives change depending on how I choose to go about looking at this connection with the divine, connection with all things. It changes. If I decide that I'm going to go against it, chances are good the outcomes in my life at some point in time are going to continue to be negative, uncomfortable, pain, fear, worry, doubt. Those are the things that will keep coming. If I decide to flow with it, you could see the more positive side of a peaceful existence no matter what's happening in life. You could experience true love in the world. I'm not talking about being in love sexually. I'm talking about true love. So these ancient teachings, these scriptures, this Bible, from an Aramaic perspective, go about telling us exactly what to do and how to do it to effectively connect with God, and we will talk more about effective prayer in the effective prayer section of the website. So we'll talk about this effective prayer, and also what has to happen for me as a human being who's come to this point where I recognize I need to do this. And I ask the question, well, so how do I get to that vibration, light, sound, energy? How do I get to let that flow freely? And the lessons of the Beatitudes give us an incredible recipe of exactly how to talk with God and work through that process that's described in the Beatitudes in order to become whole. He even tells us about what happens inside of ourselves, and he tells us what happens out in the world as we begin to do this, and he tells us how we know we're being successful in doing this. And so the goal here is for all of us to be able to have access to this and to be able to walk in this space and in this place. And here's the key: in the world. In the world. The expression that I know you have to have heard is be in the world, not of it. And so that's what we're after. That's what we're after. So we're not saying you won't be able to work. We're not saying you won't be able to have a family. There's nothing like that. Certainly through these teachings, we're not trying to tell you that anything you're doing is right or wrong. We're just telling you that there's more. There's a lot more to know, and we would like to share that with you. Again, in our seminars, workshops, the talks that we do, the retreats that we do, in those places, we take each individual person and we help them go through these lessons and personalize it, so that they know what to do about their life situations, how to use these tools in their life's situation in order to continue to move effectively as you go forward. It's not a once and done process, by the way. This is an everyday event. But in the workshops and the seminars, we take our time to step through to make sure that the language is understood and that the work it's understood how to do the work and how to be prayerful in doing that work. So we have this idea that there's much more being said behind what we read, what we typically read in the English and in other languages like the English language. We aren't saying that anything is wrong with that language as written, and that Holy Spirit will help us to interpret those things as we continue to grow, continue to mature, and build character in our lives, begin to have a better understanding of how the divine works. These ancient teachings, this way of looking at it from an Aramaic perspective, complements that. Does not take away from it. It simply clarifies and adds depth. It does not add anything new. It just simply adds depth. And that's why we call ourselves deeper in spirit. So I've said these are ancient teachings, and I think that's an important piece to really very quickly understand. These are ancient teachings. Jesus was very clear when he was doing these teachings. He said, I have not told you anything on my own authority. I've not given you anything. I've only told you what my Father's told me. These teachings go back to the beginning of time. And so we won't have the argument about the timing of things. We won't have the argument about whether Jesus is Messiah. We won't have the argument about the creation story. But what I can tell you with all great confidence is that these teachings work. These teachings work. And these are just two core teachings. There's much, much more, and we'll continue to add to the website as we go along.